And hello, everyone. Glad you're here. Thank you to the Achieving Solutions, Creating Solutions one reality at a time. Appreciate you being here. My name is Mark Entricken. This is our weekly podcast, and I love having you here. We have a wonderful guest today. We'll talk about her in just a second. Who is Creating Solutions, or what is Creating Solutions one reality at a time? It's about, as we say, achieving unity through the power of caring, helping, and including others. And I will tell you that we're adjusting that as I speak. We'll talk about that again in the presentation in a moment, because it's about inspiration that we want to build forward and not just caring and helping. But we'll go into that in a minute. We'll talk more about that. Something else that we do is building prenuptial or relationship agreements. This is for clear understandings, and we coach parents to resolving problems in marriage or pre-marriage, before marriage, to achieving successful parenting time during or after a divorce. There's so much to relationships that we don't think about from day to day, and we'll cover more of this later, because part of what we build, what we deal with in life, what we work with, is our relationship to others and our understanding of relationships. Also, creating the solutions based on the personal or professional realities and possible and struggles in front of you. I help businesses be able to build upon making decisions quickly, correctly, and growing forward. It shows there. This is my main site. If you go to www.markentricken.com or www.achievingunity.com, this is the page that you will see. Achieving Unity Weekly Podcast. That's where we're in right now. It is every Thursday. If it's not a U.S. holiday, we will not be meeting on Thanksgiving Day in the U.S., but I will have a recording on for that day. It is at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, every Thursday. Again, from reality focused dynamics to success focused solutions we create. Please contact us today for more information on using Agile and Lean from the business side. We do this outside of just software. It's amazing how many of our business principles will also work in our relationships. Philosophy can be used in every discipline, every vertical. Agile is the ability to create and respond to change, enabling success in an uncertain and turbulent environment by emphasizing the adaptability and collaboration. Lean is a methodology or study of methods focused on maximizing value by minimizing waste and optimizing your processes through continuous process improvement, effectiveness, and efficiency. Connect with me and I'll show you how to break all projects and services down from the most complex projects to training our teenagers. Again, yes, so many of these things that we do in business, have we thought about the benefits at our home, in our social life? They do work. Let me show you more. Let me show you how you can turn changing into improving. Changing is short term, improving is long term. Developing into the delivery and software and solutions. Write it down, break it down, review its dependencies, get it done. Also, we're talking today about achieving unity through the power of encouraging, inspiring, and including others. That's the adjustment that I've made. So, caring and helping, we're going to work toward encouraging, inspiring, and including others. Encouragement can be the strongest power known around the world today. And that power is the center of empowerment as we empower others. Through unity, we'll be the team of success as we encourage each other to achieve each and every goal. On the relationship side, from relationship issues to parenting time, for divorced or divorcing parents, I show how to turn frustration. You've heard people say, "What the frustration?" into an understanding, because we can quickly learn there is absolutely no value to anger, because anger is nothing more than actions not gaining effective results. For personal relationships to prenuptial agreements, and the nuptials not required, we can learn to be reality focused. Life does happen, and we can embrace and enjoy every moment of it. Our relationship course workbook also includes and promotes personal agreement discussions as well as employment agreement discussions and reviews that everyone can commit to achieve. If you'd like, please use your camera right now to look at my websites. On the left is my website home, and on the right is our contact page. If you have questions or want to sign up for our newsletter, please do so on that web contact page. Our guest, we'll go into talking to Carol in a few minutes, but next week we have Marbeth Dunn. for the International Day of Nonviolence. We have another speaker coming in about what are the plans moving forward for our International Days of Nonviolence. How do we do it? Then we have Dr. David Clark coming to talk to us on mental illness on 1010. We have other speakers talk about the National Domestic Violence Awareness, Hispanic Awareness, LGBT history, and Maury Zelkovich is going to talk to us on Veterans Day and help us and how to end and improve life for our veterans after they have retired. Then we have the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, the National Play Day with Dad, and then we show Thanksgiving. It'll be just a recorded video. So now, here is the excitement of our day. Today we're going to talk to Carol Cambridge and the Stay Safe Project. There's so much in the violence in the world today that we need to end. She starts in the workplace environment. And what she does is best serve our clients through on-site and virtual training. She manages the new energy, the de-escalation skills. She talks about surviving an active shooter, fixing your workplace, the violence strategies that you can do. In her training, she goes through keynotes, different types of training, and we'll go into more of that in a second, and videos. So if you would, please help me welcome Carol Cambridge.
Thanks.
Carol, how are you?
Good. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you being here. This is awesome. So good to see you. We've talked a few times, and I love what you're doing. That's why I want you to be here.
And where do we start with this topic? There's so much to cover in so little time.
That is so true. And make sure anybody that's watching, make sure they can see you, see us in the discussion. Last week, I did forget to turn over from the share screen. It is not sharing today. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Renee, can you see Carol okay? Jordy?
I can see everyone fine.
Good. I can see Carol, and 7 years ago, I actually visited Cambridge.
Oh, excellent. That's good to hear. It's really good to have you. And Wendy, thank you for joining. All right, Carol, you asked a great question, and let's talk about that. You work in a workplace environment. What are some of the troubles that we have in our workplace environment today?
Well, I think, as you well know, hate is on the rise, hate crimes, racist crimes, crimes for religious reasons. We're just seeing more of it all the way around. We're also seeing more of it, I think, because of people not necessarily having the skills or the understanding. So we've created an entire environment out there through social media where people think it's okay to be nasty, to make horrible remarks. They can sort of hide behind themselves, if you will, on social media. And I think this plays out in the workplace. We have a lot of people that just have never been taught to respect authority, for instance. They haven't taught to be respectful of people from other cultures, other religions, people that are other than look like themselves or a different skin color. There's been a lot in society that tells us not to be accepting. It tells us to be hateful. And I've worked a lot in studying the brain and how our brains think, and our brains have a tendency to grab on to the negative versus the positive. We have to train our brain to focus on the positive. And so it's very easy behind social media, et cetera, to grab onto all of these negative thoughts, negative ideas, and then we bring them into the workplace. And so we have a portion of the workplace that has no idea how to be respectful. And I don't think it's necessarily an age thing. I don't know what you're seeing, Mark, working with companies, but I hear that a lot. It's the younger generation. Not necessarily. I'm seeing it really across the board. People are fed up. They're tired of their boss. They've had more experience perhaps than their boss did. Now their boss got the promotion, they didn't. So there's hard feelings, there's resentment. There's all of these different dynamics going on in work environments. And there's also stress. There's so much
Oh, so
stress in our
much.
work environments these days. We have not copied, Europe and other countries around the world where living is about living. Work is kind of secondary. Here in America, work is everything. Work comes first.
Isn't
You
that crazy
know?
how we do that?
Yeah,
Can I touch on some things that you said?
absolutely.
I am getting a note here. My internet connection is unstable. Excuse me. But as you mentioned, we work in a lot of the same areas. We're very parallel in our process.
Mhm.
And a lot of my coaching is with the business side, but how we take our personal lives into the business environment. So if we have struggles with a spouse or a child or a pet, we will take some of those struggles with us into the office. And they have nothing to do with office just because let's just say your puppy made a mess on the floor. Sure, you get upset, you hate that, but why is that process still staying with you when you get to work? How, like we said, we're not trained. Where do we need to be trained? How? So many questions on that. What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, we haven't been taught, and I run into this all the time, especially when I'm dealing with companies who have high risk terminations, and workplace violence. It isn't necessarily what has happened at work, but what's happened at work has been the trigger. So that you're absolutely right. They come in, they're going through a divorce, maybe they're going through a foreclosure on their home. There's a lot of stress in the family. Maybe a child has been diagnosed with cancer. They're not sure financially how they can make it. Maybe they have a gambling addiction. Maybe there's multiples of these different stressors. And we don't know how to leave that at work. It's easy. As adults, we're always told just move on. Forget it, move on, move forward.
We
That
keep
doesn't
hearing
work.
it. Well, I love what you're saying, and like you're saying, and some of the things you say to just forget it, but that doesn't work. But one thing a question that I wrote down was when we spoke last week. I remember you mentioned that we don't know our own bias. Can you give me some examples of like what we're talking about here? But can you give me an example of how maybe that shows up even in some of your trainings?
Yes. I mean, I don't think we know how to handle our emotions properly. We haven't been taught that, and we really haven't been taught how to recognize our biases. So I deal a lot with confirmation bias. I do one program that's called Surviving an Active Shooter, and it's an experiential program. Everybody is involved. Everyone in the audience plays a part in learning how to survive an active shooter. And we actually do a couple of drills, but I start the program by letting people know that this is not going to be a discussion about gun control, not pro or against. We're just not going there
Right.
because that'll sideline the entire training.
It does.
But I also talk to them before we even get going about confirmation bias. And I explain to people who might not be aware of it that this is where our brain looks for vilification, I guess, of our beliefs. So if we believe in something strongly, and let's just use use gun control. If we believe very strongly that we should have gun control, what our brain does is it allows all the information in through media, social media, TV, newscasts, just through conversation that confirms the belief that already exists in our brain. And our brain just basically shuts off all the other information so that we're not open to hearing the other side of it. And so I explained this, and in one particular training, I probably had 250, 300 people in the audience. So it was a good size.
Wow.
And we were doing, we always do two drills. There's one drill that we do. And then after that drill, we spend time going through a debrief. What did everybody do incorrectly that would have gotten them killed? What did everybody do correctly? And how can we do that in a better way so that people will
Wow.
serve? And so after we do all of this and they learn what they're supposed to do, we have a secondary drill. And After the training, a lady came up to me and she said, Carol, I just have to tell you. She said, when you were talking about confirmation bias, she said, I thought, okay, I'm glad she's talking about that, but I don't have any biases. She was a petite, shorter, female, black, and just delightful lady. And she said to me, I've seen it all. I've been the victim of prejudice my whole life, of hatred, of crime. And she said, when you were saying that, I thought, okay, that one doesn't really apply to me because I'm pretty open and I don't have any biases. And I said, well, what happened? She said, well, it was a second drill. She said, I got up. I'm remembering everything you said. She said, I'm headed towards the door. And she said, I see a really tall man. It was a white male, and he was wearing a suit. So she said, I'm tiny, I'm petite. I got in right behind him, and I'm kind of hiding, using him sort of as my shield. And she said, we get about halfway. She said, I'm kind of looking down. I'm not looking ahead. She said, we get about halfway out of the room, and he turns around. She says, oh my gosh, he was the shooter, because we actually do place people in the room with Nerf guns. And so if you get shot with the Nerf gun, it's not going to hurt. But she said, I recognized all of a sudden that I actually have a bias. She said, I would never have guessed that in a million years. And, I
Wow.
share with her, thank her, first of all, for sharing the situation with me. But also, we had a great conversation about, yes, we have deep seated biases, even for those of us who work in the industry and we don't think we do. Humans make judgments very, very quickly. And we do have the biases. And unless we really stop and think, or we get caught up in a situation, we still have to be open. And if we're not open, if we're closed-minded about it, we're never going to discover what those biases are.
I so agree with what you're saying. And in some of my studies and the ones I'm working with, I think it touches on what you're saying about the bias, but also mentioning earlier about where those biases come from and our culture and our learnings from the time we start 1 year old. Do we care if someone else is challenged physically? Do we care about a color? No, we want to play, have fun, build something. We've got our Tinker toys or our building blocks, and we want to work together. But as we grow older, something happens. And that's not in the workplace at that age, but maybe what, from parents, from friends. I think you mentioned television,
Oh, totally.
right?
It's everyone around us. Not too long ago, it was, I think last year before Christmas, I was at Target and doing some shopping. I was looking for some toys for nephews, and all of a sudden I hear this woman and saying to the little boy, no, you can't have that. That's a girl's toy. You can't have that. Boys don't play with that. And I just thought, boy, here we are. That was 2023, and we're still defining what is okay for boys to play with and what's okay for girls to play with. So I think it comes at us in every which way. And unless we're very conscious of it, and we want to raise our kids differently, it just happens. And through video games, I mean, video games, and that's where I'm seeing a lot of violence and a lot of the active shooter situations. Kids these days don't know the difference. I'm just going to make a little bit of an assumption here on age, Mark, but I think you and I are probably around the same age. When we grew up, we didn't have video games. We knew the difference between pretend and reality. And the kids don't really get that now, the younger ones. They just hit the reset button on the video game and start it all over again. So they don't really get the concept of killing someone.
And
then
can I touch on that a little bit? Because I think that's where you're going to. They hit a reset button and everything's okay.
exactly.
Where is that reset button in life?
Yeah, we don't get it.
We don't have one.
No.
So I love your explanation on that, Carol. What can we do to help educate and train that? Can we go to the schools? Are we doing it now in the schools? I'm not sure if you work there right now, but because you're in the workplace violence, but go ahead.
I avoid the schools for a lot of
Okay.
different political reasons, educational reasons. I think our teachers have a really tough time. They're trying to correct a lot of things that the parents don't take care of at home. And quite honestly, I think we need to have parenting classes in high school and in college, because I think that's where it starts, is the education. We have a lot of young people having kids at a very young age, and some are great parents and some just aren't.
And how many, I'm sorry, you bring up so many great points, Carol. I love talking with you. We've been on the phone several times, and it's always a joy to talk with you.
Thank
But
you.
one of the things that I'm hearing you say that I do work with, because I do work with schools and I do work with parents, sometimes all of us could be great parents, but sometimes, and we could go into the TV, we could go into all kinds of areas of who we're around, but sometimes we act or react or copy what we saw somewhere else, maybe another friend and how they reacted to a situation, maybe a previous situation with our parent, something on school. But there are a lot of great parents out there, I think, but they just don't know. And sometimes they follow or maybe fall to what they've seen before. And we don't have the examples out there today because of how much violence is out there, the games that we watch, right? I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, if you think back, and I'm aging myself again, but we would watch The Partridge Family or Eight is Enough, or
Mhm.
different shows that actually showed great parenting skills. Even not Mary Tyler Moore, but what was the one
Mary
before?
Poppins?
No, gosh, and he just celebrated his 98th birthday too. Um, uh, anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll
I know
move
who you're
on.
talking about,
But a
but
lot of
okay.
different shows where they showed good parenting.
Mayberry.
That's true. Mayberry is one of them.
Mhm.
Opie was always spoken to. He did something wrong. His dad, the sheriff, always talked to him and shared what was good, bad, or indifferent and why. Now, in our busy lifestyles, we don't do that. We don't take the time to explain and answer our children in a way that they can understand and that is age appropriate. I also think we have a lot of parents who have trauma, whether they want to accept it or recognize it or not. They were traumatized from things that they went through as a child or as a teenager. Uh, so if you don't deal with that trauma, it shows up in different ways. And that can be through bad parenting, through really no fault of their own. They just don't know or have the information. And I see that a lot in the workplace because it's a trauma related situation and that person blows up. They get very upset with another employee, where maybe 10 of us in the room could hear the exact same comments and it wouldn't bother us at all. But it really bothers that one person because of their past experience.
And that so many times that they have seen that in the past. And I think you're touching on a question that Jordan just asked. What are the parenting skills that today's parents lack that the earlier generation had? What are the parenting skills that today's parents lack that the earlier generation had?
I think it's connecting. I think it's the connectivity. We have our kids in so many different things, which is great: sports, dance, different clubs, and so on. But we have them in so much, and we're so busy trying to do so much. I think one of the best parenting skills is actually learning how to say no, having to say no to a lot of things, including the things that we do or we bring in, so that we actually can answer the child's inquisitive questions and explain the why. Um, explain why this isn't good. There are so many negative influences today that we didn't have back when we were kids. We didn't have the video games, we didn't have the TV. Even if you think about politics from a number of years back, politicians could disagree in different parties. Republicans and Democrats could disagree, but they were very respectful to each other. We don't
Mhm.
see that anymore. So we have children watching this, and even if they're not paying
Exactly.
attention to it, even if they're playing, they're still hearing this. We are still hearing this every day. I like to have the kind of remote in my hand and just as the commercials come on, just shut them off, shut them off, put the program back on. I don't even watch live TV anymore. I watch streaming so that I don't have to listen to that kind of negativity. I'm not an expert when it comes to, parenting skills, but I think one of the best things is to be able to explain the difference between reality and pretend. Because our world is very different and we have so many children coming in, just getting a reward or an award for
Mhm.
participation.
That-
Participation, give me a
Mhm.
break. If you're old enough, help clean the house, do the dishes, participate. You don't get an award for
Create
that.
value. And that's, I'm with you there so much, Carol, because that's one of the things that I try to focus on, as I mentioned earlier, that anger is nothing more than actions not creating effective results. It's just a situation that where is the value in the result that we're looking for? Is there one? Back to your point of everyone gets a trophy. Well, I went through that during my divorce. My ex filed for divorce when they were 5 and 6 years old. They grew up in a situation that at first wasn't too bad. We lived a few miles apart, but then the court let her move to Chicago and take the kids.
Mhm.
I don't mean to be gender biased here because I do work with the court system and it goes both ways. And I've seen it go both ways, male, female. But the problem is our own court system is making decisions on our children with very limited knowledge themselves. And as you mentioned, how many times do we follow, or as I said earlier, just kind of copy what someone else did because we don't know and we're not sure. And we can always say, he did it, she did it, and I just did what they did. That doesn't make it right, but
Exactly.
we follow into those processes, right? And we need to be
Yeah.
more informative. And you mentioned in Mayberry, I'm trying to think of the person's name, but with the children, they were talked to, they were brought into conversations.
Yes.
Well, in today's world where there's so many divorces, now in Mayberry it was a single parent family, but in today's processes, we have a lot of single parent families that are not shared on both parents because the best parent is both parents. That's one of my domains that I've worked with. And we are not looking toward that today, or we haven't. And I think as Jordan just put in there, some of these situations should be permitted only in extreme circumstances. And I don't think we're thinking about that. We're doing too much of a global answer that doesn't fit for everyone.
Well, and I think you hit on a couple things. It has to be a perfect fit, a good fit for each of us. I like to circle back to a couple things you
Please.
shared, about anger. And what I teach people, I do a de-escalation program in companies. And one of the things I share is that when you see anger, what you really see is hurt, fear, or frustration or any combination, hurt, fear, or frustration. It could be all three. And so I'd like to go back to Jordan's question about, um, you know, what we should be teaching our kids. And I think one of the things is about how to express emotions. So, for instance, it's okay for people to be angry, right? I mean, we all get angry over things at some point. What's different or wrong today is that we don't teach people how to express that anger. So, somebody comes home and somebody in your family has a let's say a cancer diagnosis. Should you be angry? Should you be upset? Should you be hurt, fearful, frustrated with that? Yeah, absolutely. All of those uh, emotions are normal. What's not okay is to become angry, violent, verbally violent against other people. And that's the big key, I think, is we have to teach our kids it's okay to identify with different emotions. I work a lot with in male-dominated industries. I work a lot in manufacturing. Construction is probably one of my biggest areas. I work a lot in the insurance industry, so a lot of male-dominated industries. And what I experience is that men are very, very attached to the emotion of anger, but they're not as attached to the other emotions because their whole life they've been socialized to believe that those are lesser or weaker emotions
Exactly.
and that they shouldn't show that. And so I think one of the key things in raising kids is if we can teach our children, it's just like it's okay to be happy, it's okay to be loving and kind, but show them how to express that properly. Show that, that's what we have teenagers who think it's okay to rape somebody else. And the sexual violence that is going on, they think that's an okay expression of those emotions.
Well, I'm going to touch on that just a little bit further, though, Carol. Where did they learn that? You're saying they think that's okay. Somewhere they had to have been in a situation, someone, somehow, they have picked up through their learning, or as I mentioned, back to their culture, that somehow, unbelievably, could be thought of as okay. Where is that coming from?
Sometimes it's countercultures, sometimes it's pornography, sometimes it's just wanting to be part of the gang and the gang leader. And I don't mean an actual gang per se, but a clique might be a better terminology for me to use. You want to be a part of that clique that you like, the bad boy clique, that kind of thing. And so you learn that negative behavior because the leader, whoever it is perceived as the leader, is nasty. They can be violent, either physically or verbally. And people are lost if they don't have that value coming in there. They don't know how to fight it. They just don't know how to respond properly. And I think that's the whole thing. We have to teach our children how to respond.
I like what you're saying there because that's where it has to start. And again, I do work with teachers, and I do work with some of our younger generation, and our teachers. I look up to them, but I also look up to police officers because of what they have to deal with every day. I don't want to get into too much here, but the legislature that we elect writes those laws that they have to go by, and it's unbelievable. But our teachers themselves are put into situations where you can't teach that. You can't teach that. What do you mean you can't teach that? Some of it's in the books. Well, but we don't teach that here.
Yeah.
That control over our educational system is a problem. And as I talk about in my speech, too many times our own candidates that are running for the school board become violent at school board meetings. What are we teaching our children from our own adult perspectives?
Exactly. Exactly. It's a bad cycle that somehow we have to learn how to break. And it goes along with fear. It goes along with trauma. As I have mentioned to you, I work in a lot of different arenas. One of them is the hospitality arena. And I
I was
see
just
it.
going to ask you a question about that because that's one of the industries you work in. Can you share some stories about that? Illustrate how that shift in the mindset when working with those leadership teams.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the same thing. It's fear. It's handling those emotions. Um, and so last year I did a lot of work in the hospitality industry, mostly with hotels and their leadership teams. So I had everybody from the mechanics that fix things in the hotels to the head of housekeeping to the managers, front desk people. And, I got to spend half a day with each of these groups talking about anger and de-escalation. And one of the things that kept coming up, and personal safety in their situations. And one of the things that kept coming up is dealing with the homeless. And there's a lot of fear around that, a lot of fear around homeless people. And yes, there is a certain percentage, it's probably only about 25% of all homeless actually have some form of mental illness. The other 75% do not, just through unfortunate circumstances have ended up homeless. But think about it. They're in these hotels. A lot of the hotels serve a free breakfast for their guests. So, you just walk in. They don't ask for ID. You don't have to have a tag or show your room key. A lot of times it's just open and you go in, grab a plate and grab your food and sit down and eat. So at some of these locations, they were coming in, the homeless, and thought, oh, free meal. So it made it very uncomfortable for front desk people or assistant managers and managers to ask them to leave, to take the food away
Right.
from them and ask them to leave. So we were talking about different ways of handling that kind of a situation. Now, we break it up into a couple different areas. If that person is very, very smelly, very, very dirty, we just have to remove them. Or if they're showing signs
And
of
if we weren't,
mental-
any of us, if we didn't take a shower that long, I mean, it's not that person specifically, but that's a situation, right? And
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't, it's hard to be around them. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it makes guests uncomfortable. So
Right.
in certain circumstances, yes, you're going to have to ask them to leave. And if you can't get them to leave, you're going to have to call the police. But in many circumstances, it's people who maybe are poorly dressed, maybe they don't have the best hygiene, but they're not horrible. And I shared with them that one of the hotels that I had worked with, that their manager um, just said, we've got to come up with a more caring solution. And what do we do with all of this food? So he went to the cook afterwards and he said, when our breakfast stops at 9 a.m., what do you do with all of this food that's left? And he said, well, we throw it in the garbage. There's nothing else we can do with it. We just throw it in the garbage. The manager said, well, we have to go boxes, right? He said, yes. He says, why don't we package up what we have left? And he said, I'm going to share. He said, I just fed a homeless person. But we're gonna try a little experiment. And what they did was, the next time a homeless person came in, they said, we have a favor to ask you. We would like to give you breakfast. We're going to ask you to go around the corner to our back entrance, which is close to the kitchen. And if you show up there for 9 o'clock, we don't know how many breakfasts we're going to have available. Could be 8, could be 20. It just kind of depends how busy we are that particular day. And he said, you can tell other folks about it if you like, but if you are hungry, you can stand in line. We will feed you until the food runs out.
Wow.
And
What a great idea.
it was. And he said it literally stopped anytime they had a homeless person come in through the front. It made it easier for their assistant manager or their front desk person to simply say, are you here for breakfast? And they'd say, well, yes, I am. We can't have you in the lobby, sir, or we can't have you in the lobby, ma'am. But if you go around the corner to the back of our property, you'll see we have a sign on the door. And as long as there is food left, we will feed you and give you a cup of coffee or an orange juice. And they did. They started having people line up and they fed them. They ran out of food, but nobody got annoyed or angry.
What a constructive idea.
It really was. And it's sort of, it goes along, Mark, I think, with your theme, the power of caring and helping and inclusivity. That food was going to waste. It didn't cost them any money to do that, other than maybe a few, to-go boxes. That was probably the only cost, which would be very minimal to solve a problem.
It would be. And some simple things like that just puts a good idea forward. And how many good to-go boxes does a restaurant or a hotel purchase anyway? To use 5, 6, 10, 12, a dozen of them, what is the cost compared to the ability to share with others in so many ways and get rid of the trash?
Yes. And if you're there as a guest and you're witnessing an employee trying to toss out a homeless person out of the lobby or out of the kitchen area, it's uncomfortable. It's just not something that a guest wants to see. So it served both purposes. And
Good point.
what was really interesting about it was that there was one lady in one of the programs when I shared that story, and she said, well, people aren't coming to my hotel to steal the food. But she said, I'll have somebody come in, and she said, they come in with their backpack and they'll sit for 2 hours in our lobby. And I know that they're just there. They get their computer out. They're not staying with us. They're just there to use the Wi-Fi. And I said, you know what they're using the Wi-Fi for? She says, well, I've gone by a few times. And she said, there's one gentleman that comes in probably 2 or 3 times a week. And it appears that he's looking for a job.
Wow.
He may be homeless. He might be living in his car. He's fairly well groomed, but it's just really annoying to me. He shouldn't be stealing our Wi-Fi. And the whole room came down on this lady.
Sure. I
Like,
can imagine.
I asked the questions. Was he scaring anybody? Was he intimidating anybody? No. Was he causing any damage to anything? No. He just came in, sat down, minded his own business, got on their Wi-Fi, was looking for a job.
That's almost professional in itself that person did that.
Exactly. Exactly. He didn't,
Who
he
was
did-
hurting in that
yeah, who was
process?
it hurting?
If it was crowded, if the waiting room or something was crowded and there wasn't enough seats, sure, something happened. As we talked about the other person who wasn't taking a shower. After
Right.
a while, that's a different situation. But for someone coming in and do that,
Mhm.
that's a difficult way to be.
Right. So people buy into their fear, and her fear was, oh, nobody can steal. Now, I don't know what happened in her background that had her so up in arms, but to me, it wasn't causing any problems. And for the other general managers and assistant managers that were in this training, they all kind of looked at her, and we were all in agreement. It's not hurting anybody.
Mhm.
He's not taking up a seat that you need for somebody else. He's not doing anything that's negative. We're actually helping a human being. And some of them actually said, have you asked him what kind of a job he's looking for? Because we're hiring.
What a good concept. Exactly. And
But
that's
it's
one
a
of the
shift in that
situations.
mindset. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That even though, and I don't know this, but just thinking that, well, maybe he's looking for a specific level of position. He only wants to be a manager or something, and maybe they'll have a manager. It's still a chance for that person to be able to earn an income so they can afford to get out of their car if that happens to be where they're living or where they're going,
Yeah.
to be able to take that next step. I
Exactly.
love that concept.
Yeah, exactly. I learn as much from my attendees, I think, as they learn from me when I do these trainings. And, I do keynotes at big conferences and so on, but I love the trainings. I love
Mhm.
smaller groups because I love that connectivity. And I'm a very open-minded person. And so I love listening to other ideas. And I think the more open we are, the better off we are as human
But
beings.
well, can't we learn more? The more open that we are, I'm going to talk about this again in a second, but the newsletter that I put out on the Thursdays, the first and third Thursday of every month, that's one of the things that I talk about. Those ideas that we can use going forward, because so much of the negativity that we do have today, and I mentioned that on the political side, because so much of us, we are raised in that negative format and in that fear, like you're saying, because of that person that says, well, I don't want them there. That's not right. That's taking our Wi-Fi, which is, as we all know, could be megabits per second, which is a lot of speed. I learned the same things as I teach at the University of Denver, adjunct instructor in the business master's program. That ability to take away from that fear that someone has, because somebody could say, yes, but if that person's there, someone else might also know about it, and then they will come, and then they will come. They have those fears that might happen that probably have no reality coming forward, right?
Yeah.
It
It's
could happen, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's an interesting technique when I'm teaching de-escalation skills. One of the things, especially if leaders are dealing with their staff, one of the things I often say to them, rather than saying, well, you shouldn't do it this way or you should do it this way, I, I often suggest to them that they say, are you open to a different idea? Are you open to a different solution? Are you open to whatever it might be. Because even people who aren't open, they don't like to say, no, I'm not open to it, I'm closed.
But if you were to tell them right up front, here's a better way to do it, a lot of them would close right away. And
Yeah,
if you
and
ask that question, are you open to?
they'll at least listen. They
Mm-hmm.
may or may not adopt it, but they do listen. They quiet down and go, oh, because we're really giving that person permission. If they say yes, they're open to it. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I guess I better pay attention. I said yes, so I will listen for a while. May or may not adopt it, but I will listen. So that's one of the techniques that I always share. Ask people if they are open to something.
I like what you're saying. That's one of the things that I try to do also, but I ask them, oh, where did you learn how to do it that way? Just open up the process and let them start explaining about it, because many times we're saying, I learned this because of this. Then your question still comes in, are you open to another thought? Are you open to maybe thinking about it if you're not in the situation? Because too many times we have our blinders on when we're going forward with our violence, as we talked about earlier, with our anger, as we're getting mad, when we have that hate. And I'd like to talk to you more about those, but of course, we're running short on time today. But that mimicking of others in the process, when if you just ask, as you mentioned, are you open to another idea, or where did you learn how to do? Where did you learn to do it that way? And kind of open up those situations, those opportunities. As I look at the opportunity,
Yeah, you never want to be accusatory. And I think that's the other thing that has happened to us, is that we have become accusatory in the workplace. And that doesn't serve any of us. We have to be more open.
I so agree with you. And I think that one of the things, as we've mentioned earlier, and I see so often, one person is that way, and for whatever reason, they think because another person is that way, as we mentioned earlier, even better, our political candidates. I do put an S on that, plural. Political candidates and the negativity that they bring forward, someone's going to pick that up and say, well, that person's running for a political office, presidency, Senate, House, could be state, could be federal. But because of that desire for that position to be important, they will follow someone who is in that position, even though they may be just a candidate, and say, well, this person did it or that person did it, and then mimic it without any value. Where's the value to that action?
Yeah, we're definitely taught, I think, to be followers as opposed to leaders. And we don't have the kinds of leaders that I would like to see in politics today. Leaders are the ones who need to stand up and think out of the box and do things a little bit differently, using respect and value. And
some of the basic things, as you mentioned, the way the United States was founded was to get away from some of those problems and some of that political nonsense and family ownership. And that's why we came over here and wanted that freedom. And, go west, young family, go explore and do something new and exciting and build and be better when our own government is not participating in that process. And I talked about the story of my old license plate on my car was RIDL, Riddle. And that stood for Republican, Independent, Democratic, Libertarian. Why is it such a riddle to build a better world for our children? And that's where I came up with that riddle. Republican, Independent, Democratic, Libertarian. Why is it such a riddle to build a better world for our children? And I like what you're saying, Carol, the things like the workplace violence. What are we doing now to be able to reduce that violence when our own political leaders are not focused on being better people, right?
And there's definitely a culture to it. So a little known fact that I don't think you're aware of, Mark, is that I am Canadian born. So I have been in the US for, oh gosh, 32 years now. But I was born and raised. And my husband will kind of giggle at me periodically because um, Alexa will say something. And then I'll say, oh, thank you. You know, as Canadians, we tend to be more please, uh,
And that's the way I was raised, Carol. I can see that. And just for them to say something and, what's the weather today? And they tell you, say, okay, thanks. Just,
yeah.
just a polite nature. Go ahead.
And, Canadians will say, I'm sorry all the time. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Um, Sometimes when it comes to a sales point and so on, not in a good way to keep saying that, but it just goes back to customs and things that we have learned over the years. And we need to teach our kids, we need to teach those that we vote for that respect is where it's at, respect and value for each other and for ourselves. And
I so agree. And to ask another question on that is that you have customized training. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Um, yeah, everything we do is customized because it isn't a one size fits all. I like to give examples, good current examples that are relevant to the audience. And if I was talking to construction one day, let's say, I'm not going to use the same examples or the same terminology as I am in hospitality. They have totally different issues. Same as in healthcare, totally different issues, totally different problems. They're dealing with in a hospital, they're dealing with gang members in emergency rooms. They're dealing with angry parents. They're dealing with gang members. There's just all kinds of different issues that aren't relevant in the construction industry. And those aren't relevant in hospitality. And those aren't necessarily relevant in the insurance industry. And so basically, when someone hires us, they take a look and they say, well, we need a little bit of workplace violence. We need a little bit of de-escalation. We need some personal safety. We need some travel safety because our people are on the road all the time. Right. So I take a look at what's the needs, what's their issues, what's the problems, what's currently happening, and why are you calling me right now? Has something occurred? A lot of times I get calls after something bad has happened. A client recently brought me in. Well, I had to do it actually, virtual training for them for a variety of reasons, but they had one of their employees shot, and we needed to do something preemptive and to help for insurance purposes, et cetera. And we had to train all of their employees on de-escalation skills. Because their employee, nobody deserves to get shot, but I will say that that employee did absolutely everything wrong. He chose to escalate it in every which way. But it still means that the client is going to end up paying a lot of money out of pocket for what occurred. And so I just customize based on what their current issues are, what problems they're dealing with, and the specifics of what they are dealing with on a routine basis. And I'm known for being very interactive. I don't stand up and lecture. Everything is very interactive. The audience is involved because I've studied adult education for an excess of 20 years. And I know that we learn better when we are a part of the solution.
That is so true. And being part of the problem. And as you mentioned earlier, when kids are asked or when we ask those questions, we all want to pitch in and be part of the team in the process. Now, we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask for a closure from your side. And I'm actually going to touch on an idea that in the work that I do, that I bring up, we just talked about gangs in the process. And we have, of course, the worst 10 gangs in the United States or even around the world, because they're a group of people with a theoretical belief. How is a gang any different than an affiliation? How is that any different than a Republican, Independent, Democratic, Libertarian, or other party?
2 minutes won't cover the answer to that. It just won't. It just won't. You know, as I said before, we have a tendency to have more followers than we do leaders.
do.
And we need to teach people individually. I think what happens, what I see is that people don't see themselves as leaders. They think of themselves as lesser than their boss, lesser than their maybe 2 levels up. And I don't like that idea. I don't agree with it. I think everybody is a leader. And in the companies where I work, where everybody shows up and acts as a leader and everyone is respected, we just don't have those issues. We don't have the problems.
That respect, I like what you just said, because if we can have that respect for each other, it is such a strong pull for all of us going forward to be respectful. So, okay,
Yeah.
2 minutes. Do we like to close on any special point? Or
Uh,
the Stay Safe project I know is different. And I know you talk about experiences, engagement, sharing ideas, insights, and collaboration and fun. You want to close and just kind of talk about that a second?
Well, you know, we learn more when we have fun. We learn more when we're engaged. We learn more when we participate. And we learn more when we can take some of the heaviness off of our shoulders. And I think whenever we allow our employees to open up, I often will do sessions where especially with frontline employees, that we do not include the management. We do not include middle management in it. I'll do a session with them later. I want everybody to be able to open up and to share. And what I hear from middle management or upper management and what I hear from the employees is often very, very different. And they're often shocked. Sometimes the middle management is not, but the upper management is almost always shocked. And so I think we need to sort of meld that together and make sure that everybody feels like they are responsible. They're responsible for each other's safety. They're responsible for each other's respect. And it changes how things are in the workplace. And I guess the only other thing I would love to say is that I do a 30-minute discovery call. If anybody is interested in talking to me about a current situation or a problem, there is no charge. And I very often can help people walk through their issues in 30 minutes. So feel
How do they
free.
contact you? That's a good way to close. How do they contact you for this?
Online, the website is thestaysafeproject.com. Email is simple. It's Carol, Carol, at thestaysafeproject.com.
Great, Carol. Thank you so much. I have enjoyed talking with you. I so appreciate what you do and to handle and support and build on ending violence in every way possible. Thank you so much. I enjoy it.
Thank you. I
Thank you for being
appreciate
here.
you having me on.
My pleasure. Jody had to leave us. Renee's here. Wendy's here. All of you, thank you for being here. We love your feedback and want to talk with you more. And we hope to see you next week. Thank you all. Enjoy your day.
Have a good day.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.